Our last presentation before lunch today is from Leon Adato, who will be presenting Alerts Don't Suck, Your Alerts Suck. Leon is a principal technical evangelist at Kentic and has traveled from Cleveland, Ohio to speak with us today. It's his first time presenting at NANOG, and it's a pleasure to have him on stage with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it is amazing to be here. I've had a fabulous time. Again, my first NANOG, so I'm really excited. But I have been speaking and doing this kind of stuff for a little while. But let's go right into it. So a few years ago, I was tweaking an alert, and I accidentally triggered it and created 772 tickets twice in 15 minutes. And I think the worst part about it was I didn't even know I had done it until the entire help desk came up to invite me down to their area to help close the 1,544 tickets I'd created by hand. There was a mass close option. They wouldn't let me use it. So with the benefit of time and therapy and maybe some alcohol, I can look back on this formative event and really think deeply about what happened. Like, what really went wrong? Was it the tool that was a problem? Like, why should you be able to do that at all? Was it the operator? I think there's enough blame to go around, but really what I think is that it arose from an immature idea about what monitoring and alerting really are all about. So thank you for coming to my talk today. Alerts don't suck. Your alerts suck. My name is Leon Adato. I'm a middle-aged white dude giving a conference talk. That's all you need to know, except that you can find me as Leon Adato on almost all social media, and I picked that picture to give you absolute confidence that I know what the hell I'm talking about. More important, you should know that this is an oyster talk. Now, what I mean by that is I have 30 minutes. I cannot teach you anything in half an hour. In fact, in a half an hour, about the only thing I can do is irritate you. Now, when an oyster becomes irritated, it does one of two things. It creates a pearl, or it dies. I sincerely hope I do not irritate you to death today, but I figured that you should be forewarned. Instead, what I hope is that I just give you the grain of an idea, which you then take and you layer over with your own ideas and experiences until what you have is something that is precious and personal and valuable to you. Okay, the SRE handbook defines alerts. It says, I have this written down, it is a notification intended to be read by a human, and that is pushed to a system such as a bug or ticket queue, an email alias, or a pager. I'm sorry, not to blaspheme the Holy Scripture, but what the FSCK am I supposed to do with that? Like, how do I feel that alerts are anything except useless and a waste of time? And the reason why is that the SRE handbook has failed to tell me what makes an alert valuable, what makes an alert worthwhile. And again, that's the point of this talk. And I'm going to give you two ideas right up front. I'm not going to bury them, the two most important things. And the first one is this. If you have an inbox rule in your email to handle incoming alert messages, you've already admitted defeat, right? Email rules are like buttholes. Everyone has one, they all stink. The fact is that if you have one, you have said, I have no intention of dealing with this right now. I will maybe deal with it later, but probably not. And the only valid time frame for an alert is right now. That's the first rule. The second thing, welcome to my beautiful hill, the hill on which I am willing to die. It is called FYI alerts are trash. Anytime I ask people about FYI alerts, I always get the same answer. Well, I don't do anything the first time I get the message, but if I see the same message like 5 times in 15 minutes, now I know it's something I have to tell you what, Sparky, I don't get paid by the bushel. How about I give you one alert when the thing has happened 5 times in 15 minutes? How about that? All right? All right. So again, the point is that alerts have to matter, and alerts have to have value, and alerts have to be actionable. And so I want to start off by giving you, so I'm going to do this in 5 lessons, all right? And here's the first one, very important. Alerts are not the same thing as monitoring. That's point number 1. Point number 2, pay close attention, this is important. Alerts are not monitoring. And finally, for the love of God, monitoring and alerts are not the same thing, right? What I mean by that is that monitoring is nothing more and nothing less than the ongoing, regular, consistent collection of data from a set of target devices, right? Alerts, along with dashboards and reports and all the rest, are a happy byproduct of doing the first thing, of doing the monitoring thing. But if you don't do the monitoring thing, you can't have the alerts. And also, it's, you do not alert on everything, right? No, bad. Don't do that. Monitor? Absolutely. Monitor the crap out of everything. Collect every piece of data you want. But when it comes to alerting, you should be very, very thoughtful and conscious about what you're doing. Again, they should be biased toward action. So let me give you an example. Every year, your boss comes back from Nanog with a shiny new pair of socks and a monitoring solution, and he gives them to you, and you unwrap that sucker, the monitoring solution, not the socks, and the first thing you're going to do is create a high CPU alert, because we all do. And I'm here to tell you, CPU alerts are bullshit. CPU was never a problem. It is not a problem. If I have a system that is processing everything it needs to process and it's all doing fine, it's running at 98%, there's a very technical word for that. It's called correctly sized. All right. Now at this point, some of you are probably like, oh, wait a second, he's talking about that old school traditional monitoring stuff. What about the newfangled observability that I keep hearing about? What about that, Leon? Like, I want to hear about the new stuff, not the old stuff. And so, and if that's all I'm going to talk about, there's probably, a latte over at the Approved Networks booth over there, and that's the problem. I see this a lot. I see the people talking about like alerts versus monitoring versus observability, and it's not. It's really monitoring and observability, right? And so I want to flesh out some of the important details of the differences when we talk about it. Now, I'm going to draw a line in the sand, also a line on the slide, and I'm going to really lay out the differences between these two things, and I do so with the utmost respect for everyone who lost their mind and their stomach lining during the observability flame wars on Twitter over the last few years. What I am about to talk about is specifically about alerting. I do not want charity majors or the rest to come and eviscerate me after this talk. So really it's focused on that. So let's start off with monitoring. What are the things that make monitoring and observability? Well, first of all, it deals with the known unknowns, meaning I know this thing might fail, I just don't know when. It also deals with the any cardinality, meaning any amount of uniqueness. Something that happens all the time, fine, we want to monitor that. Something that happens rarely, absolutely we want to monitor that too. All cardinalities matter. Also, it's mostly manual correlation because the stuff that goes together in a fairly particular way that mostly operators and the folks who put it together know about. And so you have to manually create the correlation of, the router bone is connected to the switch bone is connected to the server bone or whatever it is. And finally, it is domain-specific signals, meaning the things that make a router look bad are fundamentally different than the things that make a storage array look bad, or the things that make a server or an application look bad. And they don't actually cross over. So that are the things that make monitoring. Now, on the observability side, what we're talking about is, first of all, unknown unknowns. I do not know what might break in this thing, and I have no idea when. Second of all, high cardinality, just the unique events, either individually unique or also in combination. There's this massive combination of things that I have never seen before, and that might be interesting. High cardinality events are what observability systems tend to look for. Also, correlation is baked in because it's dealing with a lot of data. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And finally, it is the so-called golden signals. These are things that matter to the system regardless of whether we're talking storage or network or server or application or whatever it is. And that is latency, errors, transactions, and saturation. Sorry, brain fart there. Yeah, so latency, traffic, errors, and saturation. Those aspects always matter, irrespective of the type of system we're dealing with. Now, observability, because it deals with a metric ass ton of data, typically, wide range of disparate data types coming in from traces in the application layer to the SNMP data and metrics from the network layer and all across, and it's trying to put those in combination. Usually that's more data than a human can reason about, and for that reason you need a computer to do a lot of the processing. Now, marketing people will tell you, of course, that that's AI. Now, those of us in this room who've been in IT for more than 15 minutes know that AI is a bullshit marketing term for 3 if statements in a trench coat. But that's fine. I mean, like, however you get it done, if you're going to call it ML or whatever, like, that's all right. But joking aside, the point is that my alerts have to, it's hard for me to talk about alerts in an observability space, in an observability context, because they're just so complex. That doesn't mean that everything I'm talking about today doesn't apply to observability systems. It just means that my examples would take the next 3 hours and I'm standing between you and lunch. So we're not going to do that. So a lot of my examples today are simplistic, not because that's the only ones that work, but because those are the ones I can give to you in a fairly tight package. All right, back to work. Alerts have to matter, not just to you because you're building them, but also to the person who's actually receiving them. Now, it's actually easy to understand whether an alert matters or not. There's an easy algorithm to understand. If and only if a human is supposed to do something right now about a problem that is happening right now, that is an alert. That justifies making an alert. If any of those things are not true, it's not an alert. And of course, the next thing you're thinking is, well, Leon, I have a lot of stuff that doesn't fit that, so what are they? So let's go through that. Let's take a minute and talk about it. If it does not involve a human, it is not an alert, it's automation. I don't need a human to do it, but it is a problem, it is happening right now, and I need to deal with it. That's automation. I'll talk more about that in a minute. If it does not need to happen right now, but it does need a human, and it is a problem, that's called a report. I want you to see this, but you don't have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to deal with it. If it's not a problem, but it is information that a human has to look at, that's a report. That's a dashboard. And finally, if no one is ever going to do anything about it, delete it. Thank you. It serves no purpose. And I'm not going to get deeply into this, but in monitoring systems especially, every single element is a tax on the system. It's a drag, and especially alerts, because alerts are effectively doing queries on your data set every hour, every minute, every 5 minutes. It is taking all the incoming data and it's querying it. So the more alerts you have, if you have 2,000 alerts and they trigger, and they check, not trigger, but check every minute, you are running 2,000 queries every minute on the minute against all of your data. You don't want that. So they really have to matter. All right. So there's a lot of things that go wrong when you're building an alert. There are 4 common mistakes that we should take a look at. And the first one is the trigger condition itself. Let's go back to that CPU alert. Again, CPU alerts by themselves, high CPU is bullshit. However, if I have high CPU and it's running for more than 10 minutes and I'm dropping processes and I find out that people aren't able to finish their transactions on the system and sales are getting abandoned and, like all that stuff, right? Now I have a problem. But you know what? I just defined something very, very different than high CPU. I've just defined an incredibly actionable thing, whether it means, extending the system if it's elastic or motioning it over to another system or whatever it is. The action I can take is clear because I've defined the problem. So the trigger action has to be very clear and very specific. Also, sometimes it's not the trigger, it's the time frame. Everyone looks at this graph, which actually came from a different Leon Fair. All credit to him. If you have a chance to see 2 Leons at a conference, Leon Fair is the superior Leon. In any case, everyone looks at this graph and like, oh, I know exactly what the problem is. Right there, that's it. That's the problem. No, it's not. No, that is month-end processing. That is actually, I'm running in the cloud on an elastic system and it saw that I was running really low and so it dropped a few systems to save me a couple of pennies because it's Amazon, so it's only a couple of pennies. But anyway, it dropped a couple of systems and so in relationship, it looks like it's processing higher, but it's actually doing the same amount of work, all of that. What everyone misses, everyone in this room has missed, is that that is the same amount of rise. Because our human brains don't see that. That's what you need a computer for. But that is because I am looking over time for a trigger rather than only at a particular moment for a trigger. So that's another thing that people tend to get wrong when they're building alerts. Also, people tend to set fixed thresholds. Again, CPU's at 85%, who cares? Right? Setting a fixed threshold is really the worst possible way to set a threshold. Instead, there we go. What you want to do is use the monitoring system, which is collecting data on an ongoing basis, figure out what your baseline is, and then set your threshold to be a certain amount above normal. If you have a thing that is running at 70%, then saying, okay, 10% above normal, fabulous, that's great. Now I'm 77% and I probably ought to take a look at it. Maybe, maybe not, who knows? We'll talk about that in a second. But the idea is that setting a baseline threshold gives you a relationship to the system. Now the problem with just doing a baseline is that we have systems over there, the ones that are a little bit shorter, that like, do I still care? It's not even at 50%. Like, why would I care even when it's 30% above baseline? Right? So that doesn't help. So it's really a combination of both having a upper lower bound threshold and also baseline. If it's over my lower bound threshold and it's over a base, over my baseline, and also it's over my upper bound threshold, when all those three things happen, now I have something that maybe I want to look at right now. Remember, we're talking about alerts. The only time frame that matters is right now. There may be other things on that graph that I want to look at later, report, or I might want to be able to take a look at and keep an eye on, a dashboard, but not right now, all right? The fourth pitfall is having a lack of automation. Now, what I mean by that is, again, simple example, disk is at 90%. If you have a disk that's at 90%, I'm here to tell you that everyone in this room is going to do the exact same thing first. You're going to clear the temp directory. That's what everyone does. And you know what? Just like turn it on and turn it off and back on again, we do that because it works a lot. But I got a question. Why at 2 o'clock in the morning would I drag an IT person out of bed to go clear a temp queue and then stare at the screen, nodding off as they do it, to wait to see if anything happens? Why not instead just audit when I see the thing hit the baseline and the threshold, clear the temp queue, make sure it's all better, and if it is all better, just mark the ticket as reversed, not closed. You never auto-close a ticket. Okay, I'll mark the ticket as reversed, and the human will never get notified, and the human will notice it in the morning and do a follow-up or whatever it is. And by the way, the reason why I say that you never auto-close a ticket is because only a human can close a ticket, because something happened. However, you should be able to reverse a ticket. You should be able automatically to say, oh, that problem that happened at 2 o'clock, it reversed itself 5 minutes later. Just want to let you know. Because if you see something like that happen across a series of systems or whatever, some human needs to use their big human brain. All right? Now, the reason why I'm a big fan of automation is because it's one of the most powerful things. Remember that your monitoring system is there to bear witness to the moment that the problem actually occurs. And nothing could be more powerful or more effective than having the system that is watching the problem occur act in that moment. There's a problem with that. We're network engineers, and automation, with no offense to the keynotes from the first day, automation is terrifying. You see, in the DevOps world, if they make a change to something, they're pretty like, if it goes wrong, no one's probably going to notice it for a little. It's okay. We work in the network. They're gonna know. Every single time, they're gonna know. However, what you can do is you can use automation to collect information. What kind of information can you collect? Well, you can collect a lot. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but you can, at the moment of the error, you can collect a massive amount of situational data that you might not want to monitor on a regular basis because it doesn't necessarily matter minute by minute, but it does matter in that minute. Collect that up and then insert that into the ticket. By doing this, what you're effectively doing is launching the human who is going to wake up and deal with it. You are launching them 10, 15, 20 minutes into the future of themselves because they won't have to do that stuff because you've given them the insight that they would normally have been trying to gather. And it's not just what is the metric at that moment. You can run commands with automation and say, well, try to connect from here to here. Try to do a database ping. Try to do, and here are the results, and here's the values, and here's the whatever. And so they can look at all that stuff at the time of the alert and know what the next step is supposed to be. So automation still has a place even for those of us who have CCIE numbers in the 4 digits, right? Like it still has a value. Now, if we accept that automation has, a place for us here in the network observability world, then the question is, well, how do I know what to do? And it's actually pretty easy. You ask one simple question. You find the person who's getting the ticket anyway, who's getting the message, the alert, the whatever. You ask them one question. When this thing goes wrong, what do you do? Okay? There's your automation. Well, I typed the Gefrinkle command, and if the hoofer-doofer is telling me that the Schramitz is, like, fine, talk, right? Because that's what I'm going to automate. That's it. Like, how about I type the Gefrinkle command for you, and I tell you if the hoofer-doofer and the flingadingle is having a problem. That's it. Which takes me to my 4th lesson. You need to get comfortable talking to people. Now, I'm not the first person here at Nanog or at any Nanog to put that out there, but you need to become comfortable talking nicely, by the way, because nobody in your company is a psychopathic homicidal clown. Probably. However, you need to talk with them to pursue the information just like the world's greatest detective looking for the real killer of my app 123. Like you have to really zero in on what's going on. And that's why I mentioned that you have to be on the hunt for the great useful alert. Now I say it's a hunt because the first person you talk to when you're building an alert is not the person you want to deal with. See, the first person you talk to is usually the one who's setting up the new system. And they lie. You are just one more road bump on their path to getting this thing rolled into production. They are absolutely going to stare you in the face and, nope, this thing is never going to go down. It is built like a steel rock full of angel farts and unicorn spit. It's solid. It's never going to... No, they lie to you. What you want to do is find the person who's going to live with this application day in and day out, supporting it after that. Those are the folks who are going to tell you the honest truth because they don't want to be woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning. They don't want to have to deal with it. So here are some questions you can ask that person. How do you know when something goes wrong? Again, the question I told you before. How do you know when something goes wrong? Well, I type the Gefrinkle command and then I see blah, blah, blah. Then I know what I'm supposed to be monitoring for. I'm going to type the Gefrinkle command for you. And when it comes up with blah, 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 there's no for those people for whom English is not the first language, Gefrinkle is not a word. I don't want to cause an international incident. Sorry, I was giving a talk overseas once and I saw everybody with their phone trying to look up. Anyway, so you'll type that, you'll gather the information. That's a good piece of information. Second question no one ever asks, how do you know when it's all better? And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people simply assume that bad is when it's over 80 and good is when it's below 80. And what you end up with is what's called sawtoothing. It's 80 at 79, it's 80 at 79, it's 80 at 79, right? Sometimes better is, bad is when it's been over this amount for more than 10 minutes. But all better isn't until it's below 50% for more than 30 minutes. Now I'll say it's okay. So you want to ask them, what does all better look like? So that you can put it into your reversal action along the way. Is there a knowledge article for it? Yet. Because there's going to be. I have a personal standard. I will not roll an alert into production until I can be shown a knowledge article to associate with it. And I will link to that knowledge article in the alert message. Now, it's on them. If they say in the knowledge article, they say call Bob. God pity Bob. But okay, like that's fine, right? But there has to be a knowledge article because the person who's I'm talking to isn't always going to be there and doesn't want to always have to be there. So have a knowledge article. And finally, can you make this happen on purpose? You would not believe the number of times I've been building an alert only to find out that some aspect of the alert, the verbiage that is supposed to appear in the message, or the trigger value, or where it's occurring is wrong. My favorite one was where somebody said, oh yeah, just look in this log file, and if you see the word error, that's a problem. And the challenge was that the programmers also had messages of no error found. So every 30 seconds, ticket, 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 ticket. Make sure that they can make it happen on purpose. Now, there's a couple of situations where you don't want to ask them to do that, like if you have an alert to tell you that the data center is on fire. That's not one that you want. Although, I mean, joking aside, there are situations where making it happen on purpose is simply not an option. So my trick is reverse the trigger value. If it has to be over blah, blah, set the trigger value to under blah, blah. Make sure it triggers exactly the same way. Just do that simple reversal. But they still have to make it happen. I still have to make sure it's happening on the correct system, in the right context, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's sum up. We've identified and interviewed the recipient. We have designed an alert that matters because it has a real-world trigger elements. It takes duration and baseline into account. It includes automation. And we have verified the alert is built with the intent of immediate action by a human, and it has a knowledge article and all that stuff. Okay, like we're done, right? No, there's one more lesson, and this is both the simplest and also the hardest lesson of all. What I mean is that alerts are not a set it and forget it circumstance. Things change constantly, not because people did a bad job or whatever, but just circumstances change. Usage patterns change. Applications and environments adapt, and therefore you need to plan to go back to the alert recipients every quarter, 6 months, whatever it is, and find out, is it working for you? Is it still working for you? If they say, nah, actually, I just throw it in the trash every time. Okay, well, let's turn that one off, because again, Sparky, I don't get paid by the bushel. Like, if you don't want it, fine, I'll delete it because it is a drag on my system. But if it's not working because it's simply got the wrong trigger value or the wrong whatever it is, let's fix that. Let's make this useful for you. Meanwhile, at the same time, you have an opportunity. The opportunity is for more work. I'm sorry, not really, because I work in monitoring and I sell a tool. But anyway, you have an opportunity to find out about other things. Because if you've done your job well, if you've created an alert that matters and it's actually providing value to those people, they're probably going to say, you know what? We have this other thing over here, and you're off to the races. Now you have an opportunity to provide even more value, to create even more benefit to the business, to the team, and everyone else involved. Because, again, things change, circumstances change, but the work is still important and worth doing. All right, I warned you at the beginning that you might feel irritated at this moment, and if it is, it's time maybe to reflect on everything I've shared with you and see if your experiences can offer additional context, and you can start building that pearl of your own. Meanwhile, I am ready for your questions. Thank you very much. Let me have it.
Bennett with Roblox. Thank you for this talk. I have been trying to express a lot of these same ideas to my team, and now I get appointed to somebody else who talks really loud and is very passionate about alerts.
I'm a Muppet.
So yeah, I do have one question though. When it comes to the alerts, and especially alerts that go to a pager, what are your thoughts on SLO, SLI, SLAs, as far as like application performance, or what you have agreed for what an application, if it's, network is an application, right? It's a big distributed system, but like there's other applications as well. What do you think, how do those fit in, and what do you think about alerts that go to a pager versus alerts that go to an inbox or a Slack channel?
Okay, so I'm, as you may have detected, alerts that go to an inbox are a bad idea because, again, inevitably you're going to have an email rule, and then we're just, it's trash. So, again, immediate action. I think that continues to be the thing, is that if someone says, oh, it's going in here for immediate action, and the SLA is always now. right? The mean time to respond is now. If it's anything more than now, then we have to have a conversation about whether an alert is the right thing to do. The other thing is with SLOs and SLAs and all of the S's is or what, or else. Like if I don't hit it, then the consequence is blah, and is that realistic? Because that's, SLO, there's a place for your SLXs, right? There's a value for it. But an alert, again, based on what I've defined it as, means something is happening right now that's a problem right now, and it should have value. Now, I wasn't able to include it. A longer version of this talk has it. But one of the other things that you can include in your alert reporting is the value, the dollar and cents value in an alert. Go back to the people who are getting the alert and say, if you didn't have this alert, how long would it take for you to figure it out? Like how long would it take for the users to call, or how long would it take for someone to, how long would it take without monitoring and alerting to know that it was wrong? And then how long would it take you to fix it? And how much does that cost? Whether you're taking the total loaded cost of your staff time or the lost opportunity cost because they're not available to do this other thing, however you want to figure it out. And by the way, for those people who are like, well, how am I supposed to do that? I will tell you right now, it's the same thing as being a woman on the internet. Just give a wrong answer. Everyone will tell you what it is. So just give a wrong answer. Like if somebody says, well, I don't know how much it costs if I didn't have this alert, set it at $100,000 per occurrence. Believe me, someone will tell you that's not the right number, and they will immediately begin to give you the actual data. Then in your alert report, you put that number against every time that alert triggered. Now you know the value that alert has saved the company. And that fits into the SLX conversation.
I think what I meant by the SLX is not necessarily how fast you can respond to an alert, but more along the lines of, well, let's take a network example of, I don't care if a buffer's full, right? But I do care that the network is degraded. So maybe there's like an SLO that's set for the team that we drop X amount, or we pass X amount of packets or something like that.
Right, so that goes back into correlation. That buffers by themselves is a thing you monitor, but it's not a thing you alert on. However, if buffers, you've almost started to do the thing, which is if buffer's low and also there's a degradation, if there's, a slowdown or a loss of transmission speed or whatever it is, and now I have an actionable thing. Now I know what I'm supposed to do about it. So that's, no problem. Thank you.
Matt Poundset from DNSOARC. Thanks very much. This is a great talk. I have a question about low barrier to entry tooling. Let's say you're a small not-for-profit. You've managed to deploy things like Prometheus and for data collection and monitoring. What do you put in front of that for alerting? If chances are you're probably using like a Nagios fork or something like that, where all you've got is triggered and not triggered.
Why I have no idea what you would ever use.
Well,
obligatory.
Yeah. Look, some people don't have the money to buy things that get sold at Beer and Gear. So
right, exactly. So the players change constantly in that regard. Any number of tools that I mentioned that are either open source or free will be a different set of players, 15 by the time I hit the door. So some of that is, I think the meta answer is the not-for-profit. There are communities where they talk about monitoring and alerting. There are places where those conversations go on, and that is a really good question for that space to find out what other people are using or what those low barrier to entry options are. Also remember, if we're specifically talking about not-for-profit, most organizations have not-for-profit either pricing or freebies that is very much worth it. A lot of organizations have a free tier. Now it's not going to cover like 9,000 devices, but it will cover enough, at least enough that you can then go back to your board and say, look, this is the value, once again, the value. This has saved us an effective $1,000 a month. It's worth putting $5,000 into, and usually $5,000 is exceptional. So cool. That's what I'd offer.
Thanks.
No problem. All right, I appreciate everyone sticking around with me because it is lunchtime. Oh my gosh! But thank you again.